In this video, we're going to go through and talk through some of the different transformation tools that are available, such as crop, rotate, perspective, scale, etc. This image came into GIMP, rotated 90 degrees, and since it's just one layer, if I want to do a quick rotation of the layer, I'd go into transformation and rotate 90 degrees clockwise. Now, you probably notice that the picture rotated, but the canvas behind it didn't. But we can fix that by going to Image and Fit Canvas to Layer. And there we go. There are two fundamental ways to crop an image within GIMP. The first just involves selecting the pixels you want and then cutting away the parts that you don't want. So if I come into the Rectangle Select tool, you can notice down here down the tool options, I've put in 8 to 10 because I'm going to get this printed at Walgreens or Costco or whatever on 8 by 10 paper so it fits a frame. But if I want to change it, I can change it, for example, 5 to 7. And if I want to go to landscape mode, I just click on that. It just changes to 7 to 5. And then when I come out here, it doesn't matter how I drag, that is going to have the aspect ratio of 5 to 7. Flip it if you want to. Get it adjusted just wherever you want it to be. Let's go ahead and pull that down just a little bit more. I don't want that street lamp in there, so I'm going to just move it over a little bit. And then come up into Image and crop to Selection. And there you go. We now have a 5 by 7 image that we can get printed on 5 by 7 paper, and there doesn't have to be any scaling and there's no guesswork. When you go to pick up your prints, they're going to be just what you expect. You're not limited to just a rectangular selection. You can choose any of the different selection tools, and then we can move the selection to where we want it. Again, come up to Image, crop to Selection, and there we go. Now it didn't crop or erase the pixels outside of our selection area. So if we wanted to, for example, come in and erase, it would erase on the inside. But if we wanted to erase those pixels on the outside, we could come up to Select and then choose Invert. And the difference is very subtle in that now the marching ants are in the ellipse selection set and the outside of the canvas. But now when we erase, those pixels disappear, and if we want to then go ahead and export this as a PNG file, we can add some transparency to this, which we'll get to a little bit later on. This is a picture that I took on top of the Acropolis in Athens, Greece. And it's just a little bit off a vertical. That is, it's just rotated just a degree or so counterclockwise. So we're going to go through and fix that. First thing that we're going to do, however, though, is we're going to just go ahead and crop it. And for that, I'm going to use the crop tool. And that's the second way that you can crop images. And it's pretty much the same as using the rectangular select tool and then coming up into Image and cropping to Selection, which is grayed out right now because I don't have a selection. This just sort of does it in one step. I went ahead and make sure that I check the fixed aspect ratio box. I've got it set to 7 to 5. So I'll just go ahead and drag here and get sort of an initial framing of how I want it to look. Don't really like that guy's head's down in the lower right corner, but I probably use the clone stamp tool to make him go away. Maybe we'll use this image for that when we get to it. But that's something that we can fix later. In any event, right now we just want to crop it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Enter. And we're zoomed way out. If I come into 100% here, you can see that we've got plenty of pixels there still left. So now what we want to do is rotate it, and we need some sort of reference line. So I'm looking at this vertical line right here, but I need something to reference it with, so I'm going to pull a guide out. And the way you do that is you just go ahead and mouse over either the left ruler or the top ruler, and then you just click, hold on the mouse button, and pull a guide down. If you want to make it go away, just grab it, and drag it back up and let go. It's kind of like in Microsoft Word, reminds me of that. So I'm going to come in here and put that guide right there. And like I said, you can see that it's just a little bit off. So let's go ahead and fix that. And to do that, we're going to use the rotate tool. Now when we rotated before, we were in the layer mode, and we rotated the entire layer either 90 degrees clockwise or counterclockwise or 180 degrees. But we need to be much more precise, so we're going to use what's called the arbitrary rotate tool, or just rotate. And when we click on that, and then click on the image, oh, I missed. There we go. And click on the image, a grid comes up, which is helpful because it's more intensive than just the guideline that I put in there. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. And then we can use this slider to kind of grab it, and could be jerky if it's a really big picture and your computer processor isn't very powerful, or like you're doing on a laptop. So I'm going to go ahead and reset this, and what I'm going to do instead is just come up here to the angle measurement box, and each time I click on it, it moves 1/10 of a degree. And that looks pretty good. Click on rotate. I zoom out. So that's a little more information on cropping and using the crop tool, and rotating precisely using the arbitrary rotate tool. So now you have your image framed just the way you want it, and now you want to do one of two things with it. You either want to get it printed, or you want to email it or post it online in a way that it looks decent on a screen. Now most screens still only support about 72 pixels per inch. However, if you want to print, you need a lot more pixels per inch, and so the typical number that we use is about 300, although some printers use 240. By the way, I recommend just going ahead and ordering your prints online. Costco, Walgreens, Kodak, I mean, they all do a great job, and they're really pretty speedy. In any event, let's talk about how we can prepare this for sharing on a screen or sharing via print. We're going to come up to image here, and we're going to come to scale image. Now, when you open up this dialog box, it tells us that we have a width of about 3,000 pixels by 2,000 pixels. If we change that to inches, you can see it's about 13 by 9. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, now wait a second, didn't we crop this to 7 by 5? Well, yes we did, but at a resolution of 240 pixels per inch, that forces the pixels out to about 13 inches by 9 inches wide. So let's go ahead and change this to 300. Click down here, and so now we have a resolution of 300 pixels, and we change this back to inches. Now it's 10 by 7. So if we want a print resolution of 300, let's go ahead and change this. You can't change both at the same time. You need to scale it twice. So for this particular example, let's just go ahead and say we're changing it for screen viewing. So I'm going to just type in 72, and that's 45 by 32 inches, but that's okay for now. I'm just going to go ahead, and nothing really happens on the screen because we're not zoomed in or out. When we come back into scale image now, we're going to go ahead and change this to inches, and we're probably just, let's see, what do we say? Well, let's just go ahead and stick with 7 inches. And now when we scale it again, it's quite small. When I type the 1 key, that's what it looks like at 100% on the screen. And well, on my huge monitor, that looks relatively small. You know, if you're putting it on a web page or an email attachment, that's fine. You can always make them bigger. You don't want to make them too big if you're working with screens or emailing or posting online, because it leads to slow page loading. Let's go back here and undo that scaling of image. Did it twice, right? Yeah. So now let's talk about if we want to get this thing printed. So we'll come up into image, again choose scale image, and 240 is fine. Let's see what we got inches wide. Yeah, it's 13 by 9, so let's go ahead and bump this up to 300. Anything above that you're probably not going to be able to notice with your eyeballs. So that's 10 by 7. So we'll go ahead and scale that. So now we've got it set to 300 pixels per inch. And so now we come into scale image. Again, we'll change this to inches. That's a 7:5 ratio. We're just going to go ahead and change it to that so that whoever's printing it doesn't have to use their software to shrink it down. And there we go. So at 100%, that looks pretty awesome. And when it gets put on a piece of photo paper that's 5 by 7 inches, it's going to be very rich. We're going to use this image of Big Ben that I took in London to explore the Scale Perspective tool. It's right over here, and when we click on it, we have some different options. But to be honest, I usually just kind of dive right in and diddle around with them because every picture is just a little bit different. This picture is distorted in part because of the camera lens and because I was on the ground looking up at a very tall object and I was standing relatively close to it. In any event, let's see if we can fix it. So with the perspective tool selected, let's just go ahead and click on it. This grid comes up. So there's not a whole bunch to do within the actual dialog box over here, but we do have these 4 grips, and so we're going to now just kind of go through and play around with it, make it a little bit more vertical because it was a little off of vertical. We still have the original canvas here. That's what that dotted line represents. You can play with the bottom grips, but that's not my problem in this image. You know, if I was looking down at something, I probably would want to diddle around with those. I'm going to pull it over just a little bit more. It's kind of hard to tell, but you know, we can always go back and diddle with it a little bit more. So I'll go ahead and hit enter to transform it. And it's just a little bit off there, but I like the way that it doesn't look like it tapers so much. So I think what I'm going to do next is do what I did before, and that's just kind of pull out a guideline here. And then I'm going to use the rotate tool, click on the image, and start to rotate it around until the grid is parallel with my line, my guideline that is. I'll hit enter. There we go. And now it's straightened up a little bit. And now at this point, I think I'm just going to go ahead and use the crop tool. I'll leave my aspect ratio 5:7. That's fine. And I definitely don't like these street lights that are in the way, but I can make those go away later on once we get into the clone stamp tool and using masking and that sort of thing. So it's much better. I think I'd probably rotate it again, but you get the general idea. Hopefully this gives you a pretty good idea of what you can do with the scale tool in the perspective mode.